Welcome back to the Get Off the Treadmill podcast for practice owners and leaders, where we are obsessed with how to build a successful practice and get a life too. Hi, I'm Chuck Blakeman, and we're going to dive into another topic that helps us make more money in less time, get off the treadmill, and rehumanize dentistry by giving everybody their brain back. Before we get started today, just a quick reminder to register for the Get Off the Treadmill Summit in Irvine, California, February 14 through 16. It's coming up fast, and since we keep these very small and intimate, I don't want you to have to wait until the next one. Go to gotsummit.com, G-O-T-T with two T's, gotsummit.com, and sign up today. I'll see you there. Today, I'm talking with Dr. Lance Miller. He's the owner and orthodontist at Keene Orthodontic Specialists in Keene, New Hampshire, one of my favorite places on earth. Dr. Lance attended dental school at the University of North Carolina and completed a residency at St. Louis University, graduating with an MS degree and specialty certificate in orthodontics. He is the sole owner and orthodontist at Keene Orthodontic Specialists, a 3-location orthodontic practice in Southwestern New Hampshire and Southeastern Vermont. He runs the local chapter of Smile for a Lifetime and is a member of the American Association of Orthodontists and the ADA. He's married with 2 children, and his hobbies include skiing, golfing, and watching UNC and BYU athletics, which I'm sure sometimes is a great hobby and sometimes turns you inside out. Welcome, Dr. Lance. It's great to have you here.
Thanks, Chuck. It's great to be here. And yes, the ups and downs of being a sports fan are you wouldn't trade it for anything.
There's not much you can control there. Sometimes it works great and sometimes it doesn't, and there's just nothing you can do about it.
Yeah.
You just have to, have another bowl of popcorn and keep going.
That's right. But it gets you through sometimes the long New Hampshire winters. So that Carolina basketball in the evenings, that's really what we look forward to.
That's right. So real quickly, how did you end up in Keene?
It's a great question. I don't have any family here. I don't have any connections to here. We came up to look at a practice opportunity of a doctor that was retiring. We absolutely fell in love with the area. We loved the community. We loved all of the outdoors activities that are here. So my wife and I quit my job. We moved up here on a Monday. I bought the practice on a Friday, and I started work on the following Monday. With no friends, family, or any connections. I said, this is it. There's no backing out now. But all these years later, and it was a great choice for us. Our family loves it, and it's been a great professional opportunity. So we're thrilled. And anyone who wants to come and visit, we'd love to host you, especially this time of year when the fall foliage is so beautiful.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's nothing prettier than we lived in Connecticut for 8 or 9 years. There's nothing prettier than New England in the fall. It's just, it's a blaze. I've never seen colors like purple and blue. Where do you get blue trees and pink trees and orange trees? It's just phantasmical. I love it. So it's one of my favorite places on earth, especially for those 3 or 4 weeks where you can follow the color coming down from the north. Very cool stuff.
Yep.
All right, today we want to talk about increasing production and decreasing stress. You feel like you've got some surefire steps to do that. You've been in orthodontics for a long time, so you've done the ugly, you've done the good, and you've come out the other side and said, yeah, I've got some steps that might increase production, decrease stress. Let's just give you an open mic to start with that. What is it? What do you feel like? Where should we start with increasing production and decreasing our stress? Nobody wants anything but those 2 things anyway.
Well, first off, as I'm hearing you kind of set the stage here, I'm struck by the fact that, most people would hear those 2 things and think that they're perhaps mutually exclusive.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't do both of those. You either live under a bridge with no stress, or you own an orthodontics clinic and you have lots of stress.
Right. And to a certain extent, there's some truth to that. But when I've looked at making decisions, in my practice or, even in other areas of my life, I've instead of sometimes asking, can I do this or this? Right. I always try to say, I want, instead of either or, I'd love to have both and. And I say this to my wife, and it kind of drives her a little bit crazy. But I want my cake and eat it too. And sometimes I think we can, maybe sometimes we can't. But it's at least exploring that and trying to figure out, how that can happen. So, I think when we say I want to, earn more money this year and work fewer days, I think that's possible, but we have to accept that it's possible, and maybe we have to ask the question in a little bit different way. So, for us in our practice, certainly, we've worked on all of the areas that you might think of. New patient flow. We've worked on conversion ratio. We've worked on our internal systems. We've worked on our efficiencies. We've worked on our financial controls. And so, in our world, kind of making these improvements in all of these areas, we've been able to grow our practice, and our practice has grown quite substantially over the last several years, and also reduce the number of days worked. I mentioned in the previous podcast, I used to work 5 days a week. Now I work 4 days a week. For instance, I have one satellite office I used to go to every week. I used to work there 1 day per week. We've cut the number of days that we're in that office in half. So I'm only there 2 days a month now, and our production has more than doubled. So our production per day, in other words, has gone up by a multiple of 4 over the last couple of years. That just tells me that we're doing something right.
So you struck on a chord early on there when you said most of us think that in order that we can't make more money and also spend less time in our practice. That's one of the reasons I'm a fan of yours and your orthodontics podcast, is because you take the both and approach. Well, who made that rule? And I've studied this stuff. It's in my second book, Why Employees Are Always a Bad Idea. And the rule came from the factory system. It came from the industrial age factory system, where the only way you made money was you spent time. I'm not actually paying you for how many shoes you make. I'm paying you for 8 hours of your time making shoes. And if you spend 7 hours and make twice as many shoes, I'm paying you for 7 hours. If you spend 8 hours and make half as many shoes, I'm paying you for 8 hours. We got into this mindset in the last 175 years of being a time-based world where we trade time for money. We just assume the only way to make more money is to spend more time. But we both know there's a physics problem with that. We got 168 hours a week.
Yeah, right.
And we run out. So how do we make more money in less time? That's what our Get Off the Treadmill podcast and our summits, our quarterly summits, are all about. We got to figure this out. So I love the both and. It's not a but, it's both and. Let's do both. Our mantra is let's make more money in less time. So give me an example of where, give me sort of a concrete thing you worked with, a problem you had that was eating up your time and your money, and here's something you did to fix that, just to give orthodontists and dentists and practitioners out there an idea of how to do this.
Yeah, I think one thing that you have to look very closely at when you're looking at your day as a clinical dentist or orthodontist are the times and the procedures during the day that occupy too much of your time or that deplete too much of your energy. So for me, there were certain things that I dreaded every day. And so I really looked at how can I take this procedure and totally reinvent it and totally change the way we do things. So an example of that, for instance, is when we took braces off of patients, it used to be a very prolonged appointment. We used to remove all of the braces, and then I used to take all the cement off the teeth, and then I would come back over and I would fabricate a bonded retainer, and then I would come back over and I would deliver that, and then we would take models and we would take photos, and it would take up a tremendous amount of chair time, and also my involvement in it was very doctor intensive, and I also just hated it. It was just a procedure that I just dreaded seeing. And of course, we had them on the schedule every single day. And I felt like it really zapped a lot of my energy. So, in dentistry, we were lucky to have, the advent of digital scanners where we're able to scan teeth. And I was on the fence for a long time about these because they're quite expensive and, both to acquire and to operate and increase your lab bills. And, I looked at them with a jaundiced eye for a long time. And eventually I realized that, if I implemented this technology and changed the steps that we did for this debanding procedure, I could free up a lot of my time, and I could not have this dread that I felt every day when I said, oh, it's 11 o'clock, I've got to go sit down and do this long procedure, which I think takes a lot out of me. So we did that. So now we scan for the retainers at the visit before they come off. It's gone from what used to be a 2-hour appointment is now a 30-minute appointment where the assistants remove the braces, you get the lower retainer in place. So when I come over, I'm cementing that lower retainer. I'm immediately removing braces, and then I don't have to be there. I come once to the chair instead of multiple times to the chair. The assistants then, deliver the retainers that have been made off the scan models. They give the instructions. We take the photographs 8 weeks later when the gum tissue looks a little bit better. And so we've shortened it. It's decreased my stress and my involvement. I don't dread that anymore. And it's allowed me to do other things like start more patients or increase our production. So, that's an example where, I had to get my mindset right. I had to think about the problem in a different way and realize that saving a few dollars here and there, was preventing me from, getting through this obstacle, which has then freed me up to work fewer days because we can be more efficient and also to have more time to start more patients and do other things. So that's maybe one concrete example.
So let me give our listeners a simple question to focus on what Dr. Lance just talked about. We use this a lot in our GOT summits. What is the highest and best use of your time? What you're doing right now the highest and best use of your time? And if not, how do I do it for the last time? We call that the practice owner's game. Too many of us are not practice owners. We're actually income producers. We think we're practice owners, but we're hostages to our practice. A practice owner will ask those questions. Is what I'm doing the highest and best use of my time? And if not, then how do I do this for the last time? It might be a machine. It might be training somebody else. It might be developing a process. If you want the answer to that question, how do I do this for the last time? You will find it. But first you have to ask yourself, is this the highest and best use of my time? And you just expressed that so well because you said, I don't like doing this. I really don't look forward to it. It saps my strength. That's a real yellow or almost a red light that says, if you're doing things that you really don't enjoy, that is not the highest and best use of your time. You've got to figure out how to get somebody else to do that. So that's a great little focus for them. And then here's a little exercise that I think would really help them get there. Ask yourself that question. What is the highest and best use of my time? Write down 3 things that pop in your head. And then what are 3 things that are not the highest and best use of my time? Write those down. And then ask yourself about one of them. The first one, which one of these do I want to get off my plate first? And how do I do that? How do I do this for the last time? You can't get there all at once. And I'll ask you this question, but I'm sure you didn't get there all at once where you felt like you were doing your highest and best. That's just one example. I'm sure you have a dozen more where these things crept up on you, or you just had all these things. And what do? We have to eat the elephant one bite at a time. So you did.
Right. I think that's super important. You can't only take on so many projects at once, and you do have to decide which ones to do today. But I do think, the other thing is anytime you make these sorts of decisions, I can think of another example. I used to send these very detailed final consult letters to dentists, and they were customized for each patient, and they had some real value. But it got to the point where I really couldn't do them anymore. And I had to wrestle with this. And I still, even as I'm saying this to you, feel like, man, maybe I should still be doing these long customized letters to the dentist because there was something there. So, anytime you make a decision, it's not that the counter argument is wrong. It's not that the reason to do it is wrong. It's just you have to decide what is the best use of your time. And when you ask it in that frame of mind, then you realize I'm leaving a good thing for maybe a better or best thing. That's kind of difficult. So sometimes because we're so grasping onto what's over here that we have a hard time getting to the next thing.
Dr. Lance, one of the guys who epitomizes that most in my head, a guy who seemed to always be doing his highest and best. My image of that guy, my lasting image of him from 30 years ago is he's a guy sitting at his desk with his hands behind his head and his feet are up on his desk and he's staring at the ceiling. And this is a guy that seemed to always get the important stuff done, but he never seemed to be harassed or harried. And it's because he had this art of understanding what was the best. Just to your point, this is good, but can I leave this good thing to do this best thing? And he was so good at leaving behind things that were in some cases good, and in many cases things we don't even need to do. He figured out what was the highest and best use, and he focused on those things, and he let a lot of the other things go. Or more importantly, a lot of times he just figured out how to get somebody else to do that. So maybe those letters are a good idea, and maybe somebody else in your practice could learn how to do that. It's that kind of stuff. I have this lasting image in my head. I learned this about 10 years ago. I should be walking around like everyone else has laser pointers, and I have a mirror. And my job is to figure out every time somebody points a laser pointer at me, hey, can you do X? My job is to take that laser pointer and either point it back at them, well, can you do this? Or to say, hey, isn't there somebody else over here? Or is there a process? How can I get this off my plate? How do I do this for the last time? So I think that's fantastic. And that's a discipline. I'm sure, some people are naturally this way. I'm not. I don't know if you're naturally that way or not, or if that was a discipline you've had to build. Which way is it for you?
I suppose a little bit of both. I've certainly always, liked to ask questions and reframe things in my mind. I think another advantage that I've had is some really good examples. I've been involved in a number of study groups and masterminds with people who have really expanded my way of thinking. That sounds very nebulous. And when I heard people say that before I was involved in some of these things, it didn't really resonate with me, but understanding how to think about problems is probably the most important part of it. And having other people that you trust and admire and respect and whose success you can witness, having them frame a question or tell you a different way of thinking about the problem that you're having can be incredibly useful.
No, I don't think that's nebulous at all. I think that there's real value to that. When we talk about seeing the world differently or thinking in a new way, that actually helps us. What's actually going on there is that I begin to frame the problem in a way that I can see the answer. Mm-hmm. And when I can see how this might be answered, that gives me ability to do something. So in effect, it's really changing the way I do things, not changing the way I think. But it gives me a way to think about it in a way, okay, I know, I can see that. Now I know a way to do that. We call this outside eyes. We have 4 building blocks that we build business on. And the first one is a big why. The second one is a strategic plan, not a business plan. The third one is freedom mapping your way off the processes, which is or out of the day-to-day, which is really what we're talking about today. And the fourth one is outside eyes, getting somebody else who has no dog in the hunt to speak to the way we're doing things. It's amazing. I coach and I advise so many dentists, and yet I regularly learn things from them, and I have a coach because I've got a dog in the hunt. I can't see my own forest for my trees. Yeah. It's amazing how dumb I am sometimes when I feel like, really, I'm paying you to tell me this. My coach will say, well, just do X. And I think, well, I tell people to do that all the time. Why don't I do that? Right. But we really need that. And that's the value of study groups. We have our 3 to 5 clubs in our study groups. It's really valuable to get those outside eyes because they will see things that you couldn't see in your own practice that you're actually helping somebody else with. There's such irony in that.
Absolutely. I think when you talk about freedom mapping and thinking about the processes and procedures in your practice, that's something else that, I've really taken quite seriously. We, in my vision of things, we've got really 6 areas of the practice that I focus on and that I spend time, making sure that I'm not slipping on. And so, we think about things in terms of marketing, anything we do to drive patients to give us a call. We talk about sales, anything from that phone call to when they start. We talk about operations, in the back, the way we do our clinical procedures, in the front, the way we run our, our front desk. And then we talk about financial, any money coming in or going out. Human resources would be our number 5. And then logistics like facility and compliance, supplies and equipment would be number 6. And so in my mind, I've kind of divided things up into those categories, not because that necessarily drives the way our practice runs, but because it gives me a place to put every conceivable task that needs to occur in my practice. And so part of the way we've been able to make these improvements over time is by revisiting these things. So I have a very detailed list under all of these 6 things, all of the possible areas that we could be working on in all of the areas of our practice. And of course, we're not working on all of them at the same time. Right. But about once a quarter, I pull that list out so that I'm not ignoring anything. So that I think if you're just managing your practice by whatever is giving the most problem or that's screaming the loudest today, I think you're going to end up kind of running in circles and not really getting anywhere, not really focusing on the things that are going to get you to your goals. Instead, you have to really look at what are all the areas and say, this doesn't seem like a crisis, but I know it to be an area of weakness. And if we could make an improvement here, if we could change the way that we do this clinical procedure, if we could implement this new marketing plan, it's not a high priority item, but that's really what's going to yield results. So, breaking things down, having some structure, revisiting it periodically, for me, that's been very valuable and helps me really set goals and make sure we're not leaving anything neglected.
So you've said a number of things that are really important and very practical and tactical. The title of this is Surefire Steps to Increase Production and Decrease Stress. Well, the surefire step to increase the production here is write your process down, number one. Yep. We call it freedom mapping because it should map your way to freedom for you and everyone else to be in their highest and best use of their time. But map your process. What is it? Secondly, revisit it regularly. That's so important. Too many times we map a process, we stick it on our shelf with our shelf help books to help our shelf look good, which is what a shelf help book does. And these are shelf help processes. They don't help your business. They help your shelf. Revisit it regularly. We actually do this in every single one of our meetings. We have a ritual where someone brings one of our maps, one of our freedom maps, one of our process maps, and we ask two questions. And this can be very practical for people. Someone holds the map up or they distribute it to everyone and they ask two questions. Number one, is this still the result we want? And we always have the result on the map. Yes, this is still the result we want. Great. Number two, is this still the process that will get us that result? And if the answer is yes, we put the map down and we go on with our meeting. If it's not, we get it fixed right then and there. But that keeps the maps current because we're religious about that ritual, having that done. So revisit them regularly, otherwise they have no value. And then the third thing you said was very important. We don't do this all at once. We revisit one map at a time. You revisit one area at a time. But as you're doing this, if you have a ritual for doing this, and you cycle through all of them regularly, every 2 or 3 or 4 or even 6 months, you get through them all and you keep them up to date and everybody understands how important the process is. So this is real life bullets, guys. As you're here, as you're listening to this, this is where the rubber meets the road. If you want to decrease stress, if you want to increase production, map what you're doing, revisit it regularly, and do it one at a time, and do that as a cycle. Keep those things alive in your practice and watch what that will do for your production.
Yeah, Chuck, when I bought the practice, there were certain areas that I knew I didn't know anything about. I knew weren't running how I wanted to, but I couldn't tackle them all at once. So, I mean, there was a long period of time before we kind of got around to all of these things. So certainly you have to, bite things off in manageable sizes.
Eat the elephant one bite at a time, right?
I for the longest time, had no idea about certain areas of our practice. In fact, for instance, the guy who delivers oil we have heating oil here in New England. Uh-huh. I've never spoken with him. I've never asked him to deliver oil. He's still delivering oil on the assumption that he was hired to do it by the previous owner. The invoice comes to me. I pay it. We've never, so there's certain things that just take time to get through that inertia. But the other thing that was really valuable for me is I have a I guess kind of a to-do list. It's a little bit different than that, but I do have very specifically a to-don't list. Because I have to get it out of my head somewhere. And so when I go through and there's something that I want to do, but I realize I don't have the time or energy or resources to do today, I'll put it on my to-don't list.
Excellent.
And that way it's out of my head. I'll see it there when I review it quarterly, and I'll decide whether it's still something I want to do. Sometimes the to-don't list things just expire, and then I'm glad that I never did them at all. Other times I realize now it is time to do this, but putting things down on a list that you don't want to do today has been, useful for me as well.
Great advice. Well, this has been a joy. I think people are going to get some real specific things out of this. How can they get a hold of you? I know you've got a podcast. How can they learn more about you and how you work your practice?
Yeah, I'm the host of a podcast for orthodontics called Elevate Orthodontics. It's, like I say, primarily for orthodontists, but I think all dentists and I guess business owners could get advice from it. There's not a lot of clinical. It's probably more focused on business and productivity and financial management. So that's Elevate Orthodontics. You can find it on iTunes. You can find it anywhere you can find a podcast. Our website's elevateorthopodcast.com. You can find me on Facebook, our practice, Keene Orthodontic Specialists. You can send me a message there. That's probably the best way to get a hold of me is Facebook Messenger.
Awesome, Dr. Lance. This was a joy. This is Dr. Lance Miller. Make sure you connect with his podcast, and you're going to learn a lot about how to run an orthodontic clinic. Thanks so much, Dr. Lance. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Chuck. I appreciate the opportunity.
If today's topic got your juices flowing, remember to register for the life-changing Get Off the Treadmill Summit in Irvine, California, February 14 to 16. Go to gotsummit.com, G-O-T-T with 2 T's, gotsummit.com, and sign up today. I'll see you there. If this podcast was helpful, please subscribe by computer or by phone, or connect with us at www.gotsummit.com, 2 T's, G-O-T-T summit.com. That stands for Get Off the Treadmill. We have those summits quarterly for dental practitioners only. Or connect with us at www.chuckblakeman.com or email us at grow@cranksetgroup.com. Let's get off that treadmill. Let's get into the participation age. I look forward to seeing you in the next podcast. Thanks.